Long ago, there was nothing in the universe except an enormous egg-shaped entity. Inside the egg, the opposite forces of yin and yang were all scrambled. It was a complete mess. But over time, the interactions between various substances and energies eventually conceived a being, a shaggy horned giant named Pangu. For 18,000 years, Pangu slept and grew. One day, he suddenly woke. He opened his eyes, but saw only pitch blackness. He strained his ears, but heard only unnerving silence. Pangu found his dreary surroundings highly disturbing. Flustered, Pangu conjured a magical axe and landed upon the egg a mighty chop. The egg split into two with a thunderous crack. Slowly, yin and yang began to separate. Everything dark and heavy sank down to form the earth, and the rest, light and clear, drifted up to form the heavens. But Pangu was anxious that the halves would close up again, and so he stood between the two halves to keep them apart. With each passing day, the sky rose 10 feet further above him, the earth thickened 10 feet below him, and Pangu himself grew 10 feet, just to keep up with the growing expanse and be able to hold on to it. It was a lonely and strenuous job. He endured his toil for another 6,570,000 days, or another 18,000 years, until he was certain that the realms were finally stabilized. Then, with a great crash, Pangu lay down and died. As the weary Pangu collapsed, a miraculous transformation took place. His final breath turned into winds and clouds, his voice into rumbling thunder. His left eye blazed into the sun, and the right eye gleamed into the moon. His hair and beard became stars of the Milky Way. His limbs, hands, and feet transformed into great mountains, and the blood running through his veins into flowing rivers. His flesh converted into fertile farmlands, the hairs of his skin burgeoned into lush vegetation. His bones turned into precious gems and minerals. His teeth and nails became lustrous metals, and the sweat from his extended labors fell as rainwater for the mortal world. Some say that Pangu's spirit never ceased but turned into humans, which accounts for the ancient Chinese belief that humans are the soul of all matter. Pangu sacrificed his life to create the world and his body to enrich and beautify it. Among all of his other creations came a powerful being called Hua Shu. She gave birth to twins named Fu Shi and Nua. The two gods soon married and together helped create humanity. Nua began creating humans by forming yellow clay figures with her own hands. After some time, however, her hands began to hurt. Therefore, she took a rope, dipped it in the mud, and swung it around her head. As a result, blobs of sticky mud were formed around her. The Chinese say that the clay figures formed by Nua's hands became the nobility, whereas the blobs of mud became the common people. Fu Shi and Nua genuinely cared about the people they created and considered them their children, often intervening in their lives whenever they encountered significant hardships. After the sky was mended by Nua, with some help from Fu Shi, and humanity was saved, mankind's population boomed exponentially. In ancient times, the earth was a place that teemed with lush vegetation and was full of all sorts of animals. At the time, humans knew no other way to feed themselves than by hunting. Fu Shi noticed that when hunts went well, the people were able to eat well for days. When they failed to catch anything, however, they were left to starve for indefinite periods of time. After seeing several of his children suffering from hunger, Fu Shi was overcome with pity. He went to a nearby stream, plunged his hands in, and caught several fish. He then showed humans how they could catch fish with their hands too. However, the Dragon King, Long Wang, who ruled the oceans, rivers, and the weather, was furious that humans were eating his subjects. He worried that if they continued fishing, he would soon have no one to rule over. His prime minister, a wise tortoise, advised the Dragon King to tell Fu Shi that humans could no longer fish in his rivers using their hands. Fu Shi was shocked at the Dragon King's decree and spent several days wandering the countryside, thinking about his problem. How would his children be able to eat if they couldn't use their hands to catch fish? One day, as he was sitting underneath the shade of a big tree, Fu Shi noticed a small spider weaving a web above him. It had already entrapped a few bugs in its sticky silk. Fu Shi was suddenly struck with inspiration. He gathered up a bundle of wild reeds, wove them into a large net, ran down to the river banks and threw his net in. After a few seconds, he hauled it in and was shocked at how many fish were jumping in his net. Delighted with his catch, he ran to show his children his new invention. When the Dragon King learned what Fuxi had done, he was so angry that his eyes popped straight out of his head. From that day on, the Dragon King's eyes would always bulge slightly from his head, just like his fishy subjects. His prime minister, seeing how angry he was, tried to climb onto the Dragon King's shoulder to offer some calming words. But the king was so angry that he slapped the tortoise down into the ink bowl. The tortoise and all of his children's shells were then forever stained black. Fuxi also created the 8 trigrams. The symbols are made up of 3 broken or unbroken lines and are meant to represent the 8 fundamental principles of reality. The 8 trigrams is important in Chinese Buddhism and the practice of feng shui. Fuxi is said to have inspired to draw the 8 trigrams after seeing the back of a turtle who emerged from a river. In addition to creating fishing and the 8 trigrams, Fuxi is also credited with the domestication of livestock. His reasoning was that keeping animals around for milk, meat, and labor was a lot more practical than wasting time and energy hunting. Fuxi is also said to be responsible for the invention of currency, writing, smelting metals, preserving meat, and the practice of exchanging engagement gifts, as well as the constitution of marriage. Although Fuxi is considered to be the first mythical emperor of China, in many myths he is relegated to being a less prominent figure than his sister. Since ancient Chinese society was largely matriarchal, he is usually described as an assistant whenever he's mentioned alongside Nuwa.